The Mongol Military Part 2. In this mini-lecture we'll discuss the Mongols' military organization, military training, the Great Hunt, and their war academy. We'll start off with military organization. Mongol military organization, based on decimal lines, under Genghis Khan was nothing new. Other steppe peoples, like the Khitan and the Jurchen, had been using the same system for many years beforehand. Genghis Khan was introduced to the military system during his time with Ungkon. The system introduced by Genghis Khan to the Mongols was structured as Arban, Jangun, Minkan, and Tumen. Now, please forgive me if I don't pronounce these accurately. Mongol military leadership started with an Arban at the bottom of the chain. Every Mongol warrior belonged to an Arban. An Arban consisted of 10 men, with one being the commander. 10 Arbans equaled 1 Jagun, consisting of 100 men. 10 Jagun consisted of 1,000 men and formed a Minkan. 10 Minkat, plural, if I'm pronouncing that, please forgive me if I'm not, formed 1 Tumen. And of course, 10 Tumen formed 1 Tuk. The military organizational structure was divided into 3 corps. That consisted of the Gar, right flank, Gar, left flank, and Tab, or Gol, center or pivot. To move this large army, the command structure, of course, started with Genghis Khan, who issued orders to 3 commanders in charge of the 3 Tumen. Basically, it looks something like this. Genghis Khan at the top, below him would be Army Central, to his right is Army West, and to his left is Army East. And each one of those armies would consist of 1 Tumen, so you have 30,000 men right there. To break down the chain of command further, Marco Polo provides more detail. Quote, "You see, when a Tartar prince goes forth to war, he takes with him, say, 100,000 horse. Well, he appoints an officer to every 10 men, 1 to every 100, 1 to every 1,000, and 1 to every 10,000, so that his own orders have to be given to 10 persons only, and each of these 10 persons has to pass the orders only to other 10, and so on, no one having to give orders to more than 10, and everyone in turn is responsible only to the officer immediately over him, and the discipline and order that comes of this method is marvelous, for they are a people very obedient to their chiefs." End quote. Even though Marco Polo wrote this during the time of Kublai Khan, the document indicates that the military organization Genghis Khan had set in place was still in use and relatively unchanged. Furthermore, Marco Polo's description shows how well organized the Mongol military staff was, and indicates the effectiveness of this system to rapidly relay orders from the top down and information from the bottom up. This allowed swift changes to be made during the thick of battle. With such a large army on hand, every Mongol performed certain duties within the camp. Some were in charge of carrying bows and arrows. Others were responsible for the manufacturing of the arrows. Some were responsible for food and drink. Others were responsible for watching over the sheep and horses in the pasture. Carts were of great importance, and men were assigned to prepare, repair, and watch over them. Carrying swords was another duty. Overseeing the domestic staff was another. Lastly, 2 men would serve as guardians of the assembly. Overall, every Mongol soldier had a duty to perform, and most likely rotated out to perform other tasks once every other 2 weeks. Leaving one Mongol unit for another was unheard of. The Persian historian and bureaucrat Juvani, if I'm pronouncing that right, probably not, 1226 to 1283, noted, "No man may depart to another unit than the 100, 1,000, or 10 to which he had been assigned, nor may he seek refuge elsewhere." End quote. The organization of the Mongol support structure would look something like this. I'm going to have these little images for you to look at. At the top you have Genghis Khan, and I'm just looking at it from my viewpoint, but at the top you have Genghis Khan on the right hand side, or it could be on the left hand side. You have the Imperial Guard, overseer of the domestic staff. On the other side you have operational planners, engineers, and advisors. Below the operational planners, engineers, and advisors is the chief of staff, overseer of the preparedness of the carts. And from there it branches out. You got messengers, overseer of food and drink, overseer of sheep pasture, overseer of bow and swords, and then below that you got overseer of horse pasture again, overseer of horse training, and the list just keeps going on and on and on. Now, when it comes to the military training, which also involves the Great Hunt, when it came to military training, the Mongols would take part in the Great Hunt called the Nurj. The Nurj was a way for the Great Khan, starting with Genghis Khan, to see how well his commanders led their men on a hunting expedition and how well the soldiers performed. The Nurj was nothing more than a war game, but an important one at that. Genghis Khan and his descendants understood the importance of military exercise. The Mongols partook in the Nurj every winter. Before winter arrived, the Great Khan would send out orders to his commanders to send 7 out of 10 men with arms to participate in the hunt. Once the men arrived, they would be placed under one of 3 military wings, the right wing, left wing, or center army. Afterwards, the Great Khan would arrive with his huge entourage of ladies, concubines, food, and drink. Once all was ready, the armies pushed ahead slowly, forming a large circle. For 2 to 3 months, they would slowly push forward, disrupting the habitat before them and causing millions of creatures to rush away from the oncoming line of cavalry. The goal was to make sure that no animal escaped the ring. If any animal were to escape, the commanders, along with the men, were severely punished for being irresponsible. Once the ring was tight enough, it was 10 miles in circumference. Afterwards, the Great Khan would enter the circle, which at that time would be teeming with wild animals, and he would pull back his bowstring and fire an arrow at his prey. After the Great Khan had finished, the princes would take their turn, and soon after the commanders and the lower ranks, and so forth. The carnage would go on for several days before a group of men would come forth and beg the Great Khan to allow the remaining animals to go free to find food and water. As for the dead animals, the Khan's men would begin gathering the corpses, which were counted, and each warrior received his share. While one would think that the Nurj taught little to the Mongol armies, since many were already familiar with such training, as it was a part of their culture, but the training was necessary to sharpen the skills of those commanders and soldiers. Such drills exercised the army as a whole and taught the individual warrior much. Mass training allowed the Mongols to practice horsemanship, strategy, tactics, and communication at a distance, since they used signals to coordinate precise tactical maneuvers with strategic precision. Such actions during the heat of battle, or even in a great hunt, allows commanders and lower-ranking officers and soldiers to react to any situation without waiting for orders from above. Genghis Khan and his great commanders like Subadai educated the officers and the common soldier in the ability to be flexible. Flexibility is the key. With flexibility came the ability to adapt under any condition, and once the army, whether on a macro or micro level, became comfortable with the surroundings, that is when the lethality of the army can be coordinated on the intended target. War games. Besides the Nurj was the sham fight. The sham fight was what we call today war games, where 2 armies face in a non-lethal contest. Genghis Khan understood that while hunting, cornering and engaging the animals was one way to train an army, the idea of actual mock combat was another. During the sham fight, Genghis Khan would have large forces square off against one another. Large Mongol forces, perhaps 2 Tumen, 20,000 men, would engage in a ballet of attack, retreat, and wheeling as a unit. The men partaking in this fight would be close kin to one another, and the side that lost felt disgraced. The goal was to see who could outmaneuver the other in a series of circumvent moves. Forces from both sides would continue to probe each other's line until one side outflanked or pierced the enemy's center. The sham fight sharpened the skills and senses of Mongol officers and soldiers under the command. Furthermore, it tested the clarity of the crucial bidirectional flow of information during the organized chaos of mock combat. It allowed commanders to reevaluate how fast their units reacted to orders and how their officers and subordinate military units responded. the Mongol War Academy. While the nerds taught much to all ranks, those who wished to further their understanding in the art of war attended an academy. The Mongol Academy came about due to Genghis Khan's keen understanding of the ever-changing nature of warfare. This willingness to learn from setbacks and even victory filled a void in an officer's education. However, this academy did not come until some time later. Any officer who desired to lead a Mongol regiment had to attend the academy. The education primarily focused on the art of siege warfare. The reason for making siege warfare the Mongol focus was due to the challenge in dealing with fortified cities throughout northern China. The officer in question would be trained by Chinese siege experts in how to best approach the walls of the city. These educators would train the officers in the use of large shields that provided suitable protection to the soldiers advancing towards the walls. Once close enough, the officers would be instructed in the deployment and use of storming ladders and sandbags. When the officer had completed his training, he would take back the knowledge to his men where they would make the devices needed, train with the men, and store them in special arsenals for future use under the supervision of the officer appointed to provide such crucial support when needed. While training in siege warfare was a major focus in the Mongol military, the actual experience the officers underwent in scaling fortress walls was valuable in training future officers. Besides siege warfare, the experience the officers faced in battle was also crucial in preparing future officers. The diverse strategies and tactics utilized by their enemies were taught to younger officers. In a way, those future officers would learn how to approach the enemy and how the enemy might approach them, and the best way to counterattack their efforts to defeat them. Such military exercises cultivated the young officer's mind to help him perform with near precision on the field of battle. In conclusion, the Mongol military organization was in many ways ahead of its time. It reminds one of the old Roman system and of the more modern military armies to come many centuries after the Mongol rampage throughout Eurasia. Overall, Genghis Khan did well in creating and establishing a fighting machine the world has never forgotten, but continues to mesmerize us by its sheer ability to innovate, adapt, and overcome nearly all obstacles thrown in its way. Now, I plan on doing possibly another. There might be a part 3 to this. I'm looking at the idea of maybe working with more of weapons and looking at their horse and their armor and so forth. So there could be a part 3. I'm really thinking about doing a part 3. There might be a part 4 if it gets a little too big. Anyways, if you enjoyed this little mini brief lecture, give it a thumbs up, comment down below,